Hey guys, Matt Dean here from Dean Family Acres, and today we're going to start on Muscadine planting 3.0. And I'm saying 3.0 because this will actually include the third trellis video that we've had on the channel. So let's proceed and we'll see exactly what we're going to plant in regards to varieties and get those in the ground today. We'll be doing the trellis, good chance, in another video. Dean Family Acres. All right guys, so we've got three different muscadines here. We've got a Fry Seedless, a Sweetmix, and a Pam. We picked up the Sweetmix and Pam from Ison's last year when we went down there and visited. You can check out that video right here, right in here. So why do you think we chose these three varieties? Let's talk about it. So when we went to Ison's last year, we wanted to get a Supreme. They were out of Supreme. So Greg recommended Sweetmix. We're gonna try it. I've heard mixed reviews. In all honesty, I don't know that I necessarily would have taken that as an alternative to Supreme, but it sounds like some folks have really good harvest off of a Sweetmix, and others have a hard time getting a full crop on Sweetmix. So I guess we're gonna be the guinea pig and we'll see exactly how well that goes. Pam was one of our favorites the first time that we went and visited the UGA test vineyard. I guess that was about 2.5 years ago now. And that was one of our favorite named varieties. So we actually bought one of those and had it planted on this trellis here down at the front. And it died. It did not make it. It leafed out and then just completely died out. So we got a Pam replacement. Pam is a very large bronze. It is a female, but it is a wonderful flavor. And last but not least, we got the Fry Seedless. Now you might be wondering, why in the world did we get a Fry Seedless? Insert seedless. I will say that overall, I wouldn't have necessarily picked this variety if I would have paid for it and didn't have a friend that was willing to let us air layer last year, because Fry Seedless is known for not having a very strong crop. We're gonna offset some of that in one way. We're gonna try and offset the lack of vigor and strong crop on this Fry Seedless by giving it a little bit less spacing, so that maybe it can stay a little more compact and just grow into a stronger vine in regards to production. We'll see if that works. You never know. The recommendation for spacing on muscadine vines has always been 16 to 20 feet in general. Here recently there has been some push in regards to leaning on the side of the shorter distance. And when I'm saying 16 to 20 feet, I'm talking about you plant your vine in the middle of that and then you let your two cordons go. Obviously half of that distance each way. The push has been recently for that to be an encouragement to only do 16 feet. That can be advantageous to have only 16 feet, but potentially if you've got a very strong grower that's very vigorous, it might end up being something that you're going to need to prune a little bit extra. So you want to think about that in regards to when you're doing your spacing. In the past, we've done about 20 feet. We've also done about, I think, 12 feet, just depending on where we are. The next two rows that we're going to be putting in here, we are a little bit more limited on space. So we're going to go with this approximately the 15 to 16 foot spacing. All right guys, so next what we're gonna do is we're gonna measure out our spacing. If you saw the video, it's probably been about 2 years ago, when we were planning to put in this second trellis here, we had already planted a couple plants out here. And before we had actually put in our 3 rows of blueberries, and we talked about that, it was, I believe, titled Planting Our Orchard, something like that. I'll link it up here just so you can watch it. I actually went back and watched it a little bit myself because it allowed us to kind of see what we were thinking about back then, so I didn't have to reinvent the wheel. In all honesty, the biggest thing for me is the spacing that we had over here. In between these two trellises, we did 12 feet, and then we talked about doing 10 feet going this direction. And the reason we decided to do 10 feet back then, and I think we're going to still hold to that, is just so that we could potentially fit 3 more rows on this side. So just kind of thinking about where your property is, what spacing you have, that kind of thing. So that's why we're going to look at doing 10 feet spacing here. And again, we're going to do the 15 to 16 foot per plant. Now let's talk about the amount of space that we have over here. You might notice behind me that both of these posts are in line. So my goal is for us to actually continue that line going this direction. And when we're going this direction, again, kind of thinking about that spacing, we're gonna do them about 10 feet apart. That gives us potentially room for 3 more rows. Now, they will be a little bit staggered because of a couple different things. Let me show you why. There's a crepe myrtle right here. So as you can see, that crepe myrtle right there could potentially be a problem. This wind could be a problem today too. So the crepe myrtle is here, our other trellis is over here, and we can't just continue coming across unless we take that crepe myrtle out. And any of you who have ever had crepe myrtles know you really can't take a crepe myrtle out because it's going to continue to grow forever. So and that's a nice beautiful one, and it's actually a line of them on this side of our property. So we're not going to cut that down. What we're going to do is kind of stagger and make it where we step down about 10 feet from the crepe myrtle. So I'm going to get out the tape measure and we're going to see exactly what and or how, and mark some of these spots with spray paint so we can kind of have a plan and work forward with this. Another aspect you want to make sure of is that you want to have full sun. So you want to make sure which direction your sun's going to rise and set, and that you're going to have 8, I would say even up to 10 plus hours of sun every day. The more sun that you're going to have on your muscadine plants, the better they are going to perform and produce. So if you have a shady spot that's really the only spot, you want to make sure you're getting a really vigorous vine. But I will just tell you from experience, if it's super shady, there's a good chance you won't get any production. So remember, you want to have a nice sunny location. There's been multiple times when we've had folks ask about what in the world do you need to do in regards to your soil. I've got horrible clay soil. What do I need to do in order to plant muscadines? And the bottom line is that muscadines, really, they like clay soil. You just got to be able to work with clay soil in regards to making sure that you're keeping that moisture right. Clay can be excellent, but it also can be a little bit of a challenge. What we do is we choose to amend the soil a little bit, and we're going to use some compost and some pine bark soil conditioner. Another aspect that you want to consider is certainly your soil pH. You want to be around 6.5 is where you want to be, which a lot of the country tends to be that way, but don't just assume. I would strongly encourage you to try and do a soil test. I know that's something that has bitten us before because we wanted to try and be cheap, so we didn't do the soil test. And then a year or so later, we wonder what in the world's going on. And you kind of check and you're like, probably should have done that soil test. So don't just make the assumption. I would strongly encourage you. That pH is very important. So as you can see here, we've lined up exactly where our posts are going to go, where our plants are going to go, etc. Could you do this with a string? Yes, and honestly, that would be optimal. I really just didn't want to walk the 300 yards or so over to the shop and go looking for string for who knows how long. So I eyeballed it. I'm pretty certain I've gotten it pretty close, and I'll just continue to evaluate as we get these planted. Also, my spacing worked out almost perfect in regards to 10 feet from the tree up there and down. I'm gonna have 1 extra foot in there. So what we can do is kind of just adjust where our plants are just a little bit in regards to making sure that those line up. The things that you want to remember is you definitely do want to have a trellis. We mentioned that earlier. If you haven't watched our other trellis videos, we've got a couple different renditions. This one will be very similar to 2.0 in regards to when we're building it, because that's what's next to it. I would strongly encourage you, if you're doing more than, I'd say, 2 vines, you need to do this version. Don't go do 4x4 posts unless, again, you're just doing like 1, maybe 2 vines. And even then, you know, 15-20 years, those posts probably aren't going to be standing up. So honestly, for a lot of folks, it could even be cheaper if you get your telephone poles or corner fence posts. You're looking for the 6-inch diameter or more, and whatever works best in regards to what you can put your hands on, pick up, find, barter, etc. Other items that you're going to need for this trellis is you're gonna need some wire. You need to have 9-gauge wire for that. And you just need to make sure that you're gonna have at least a couple of feet on either end to be able to kind of tension that up. Don't just buy a 50-foot roll and you're gonna put up 50-foot trellis. That's not gonna work. You're gonna have a hard time, you're gonna be fighting it. You definitely wanna make sure, I would say you've probably got at least 2 to 3 feet on either end, so that it does give you some flexibility in regards to getting that set up appropriately. One of the last things that you're going to need for the trellis system is you're gonna need a way to tension that wire. Essentially, could you just pull that wire around your post and staple it to it? You could, but it's gonna start to lose its tension over time. And you need a way to tension that, whether you're using kind of your traditional tensioner that you might use on an electric fence. That could potentially work on a shorter run. There's also turnbuckles that you can use. Those certainly can work really, really well. What's become popular here in the last couple of years has been some, we call them gripples. I believe that's the correct pronunciation. And the cool thing about those are you just drill your hole through the post and you push that wire through the hole, and then you put the wire one way through the gripple, and it only holds going one way. It will not pull back. The only downside we've run into with these is if your wire has a little bit of a burr on it. So when you cut it, you want to make sure that it is somewhat smooth. But we had one that kind of jammed up and messed up our gripple. These things aren't super expensive, but they're not cheap either, so it is a little frustrating when you kind of get one messed up. Having said that, I'm going to link all of these things down below just so that if you want to order from a simple spot, everything is listed down below. Just as to let you know, we do get a very, very small percentage when folks order from these links down below. So it does help the channel. We certainly do appreciate that, and it doesn't cost you anything extra. Alright guys, so next we're going to dig our holes and then we're going to amend the soil. I always end up amending our super heavy clay soil with pine bark soil conditioner and some form of compost. I would encourage you to do the same. You don't want to just fill the hole with just that stuff and it end up just creating a bowl for water to hold into, because you do want muscadines to be able to drain well. So that's kind of the downside of amending too much. But I feel like it's helpful to get them off to a good start to actually amend the hole some when you're planting. So think about that. And again, clay can be absolutely wonderful, but it also can be a nightmare when you kind of start planting through things. If you do have some sandy loam, just remember you're gonna have to water a lot, and I would certainly amend your soil with a lot of compost and making sure that you're getting them off to a good start. If you're starting to plant rows, you might even want to get some compost, and again, not hot compost. You want this to be well aged, and I always encourage everyone, do not use horse manure for compost. You will end up with more weeds than you've ever dealt with in your entire life. So just think about that. There might be one or two folks that tell you, oh no, I use horse compost all the time. Sure they do, okay? As I've seen and as I've talked to others, horse manure is just absolutely full of weeds. All you need to do is go look at a horse field that has a lot of horses in it and see exactly what it looks like. It's full of weeds. When you do amend that soil, I would encourage you, if you do have that loamy or super sandy soil, you will probably want to till in that whole row, if at all possible, with as much well-aged compost. So here we go. Let's get these holes dug. This clay here is honestly not too bad. There's some areas over that way, and I must be just out of the old road bed. There's some areas over that way that there's like no, it's just straight red clay with no topsoil at all. This actually isn't too bad. All right guys, so we got all of the holes dug and amended, and remember, when you have clay soil, you want to use some pine bark soil conditioner as well as some compost of some form. You do not want to use any kind of fertilizer in your hole when you're planting. If you have sandy soil or loamy kind of sand soil, then you want to use just a majority of compost. That pine bark soil conditioner, really what it does is improves drainage. Also, don't forget, you definitely want to make sure your pH is okay. 6 to 6.5. All right guys, so now it's time to decide exactly which plants we want to plant where and how we're going to coordinate that. So we want to look at exactly which ones are self-fertile and which ones are female. In reality, it really won't matter because our first row is nothing but Ruby Crisp. They are all self-fertile, and these will be within a, say, about 22-foot space. You want them within 50 feet, so we should be fine. This next row, what we have is Late Fry, Black Beauty, and Supreme. So there will be some females on this row, but again, it won't matter here in regards to if we're gonna have self-fertile or females. We just kind of want to think through in regards to the vigor of those vines and maybe where we want to put each one, which one we kind of have preference on. The next row, we definitely want to kind of think forward, and we probably do want to make sure that we've got some self-fertiles on that side. Again, we shouldn't have a problem just because of the vicinity. You want to have your female varieties within 50 feet of your self-fertiles. My good buddy Ronnie from Early Bird Farms SC and I were having a conversation on the phone the other day and talking about why we do YouTube, why we do videos, etc. And because of a couple different things that came up. Number one was because of labeling. When you're planting a bunch of different varieties of things, you want to try and label it. Some people are like, you know what, it doesn't matter, I'm just going to plant it. What if you really, really like that variety? You want to make sure that you can tell other people, hey, this is what I purchased, this is what I have, this is what you need to get. That's number one in regards to labeling. Number two in regards to labeling is, you know, what if it's something that's out of patent and you want to replicate that? A lot of things are rolling out of patent and have in the last 15 to 20 years. And if it's something that maybe you want to replicate and share with friends or family, or possibly even sell a few of, then you certainly could do that as well. Again, the knowledge and knowing what your plants are and taking the time to label them properly is key. Open and honest with you here, sometimes we don't do a really good job of that. Someone made a comment about our figs and the paint pens. In general, that works really, really well, but you do have to stay on top of it, and I would not recommend that for a long-term solution. Something like this would be an absolute great solution, and it really doesn't cost you anything else. These tags we actually got from when our pets got vaccinated for rabies, and they give you these tags. You don't necessarily have to keep them on your pet. What we do is we kind of just put them in an envelope and put the year on it, but after a year you don't need them anymore. So we actually took these and just etched into the back what the variety was and exactly when we planted that by the year. So that works really, really well. Also, these aluminum tags that we've used during grafting, these here are actually from our Bradford pear graft when we cut it back and put fruiting varieties on it. These work really, really well. They're very affordable, so I would encourage you to do that. You could also get a label maker, something like that. Just want to think about your time frame, how long these things are going to last. 99% of the time it's UV, and or the issue is how you're going to attach it. On a muscadine vine, it's not a huge issue because you can just put it directly on the trellis. But if you're going to tag something else, you want to make sure that you're not putting it directly on a vine or a branch. If possible, at least not for a long-term solution, because that is going to girdle that vine or that branch or tree. So just continue to think about that as you are trying to keep things organized. Number two for us is we do this. Number two for us keeping up with these videos and doing things is just to see the progress and how things are. I mentioned that video earlier from 2 years ago when we were actually laying out this orchard, vineyard, trellis system, and our blueberries and just what future plans were. That was great for us to be able to say, hey, hang on a second. What did we talk about back then? Does that still make sense? Did our idea change? Let's decide for moving forward. with that, that allows us to be able to just have a database or research to be able to know where we've come from and those kinds of things. It's also helpful for us just to be able to kind of see, this worked, this didn't. Maybe we need to modify exactly what we've done. Some people keep written records. We really should do a better job of that, but I think that the videos do a really, really good job as well. It also allows us to see how much wisdom we're getting. Another thing in regards to the YouTube videos that makes sense for us is just being able to cherish some memories that we have in regards to, hey, this was a beautiful day that we were out. I remember putting that in the ground. The kids or some other family members or a guest or someone else kind of made an appearance and they were, as we say, a stunt double in the video. So those memories certainly make sense as well. Enough talking, let's get back into getting these varieties put in the ground. So we decided exactly where we're going to put which variety. Here at the upper portion of the hill near the crepe myrtle, we are going to put our Fry Seedless. Next, we're going to put our Pam, and then lastly, we're going to put our Sweetmix. So that way we've got our varieties organized, and until we get our tags up, then we know exactly what we have. If you've got tons and tons of space, just another thought in regards to your tagging and keeping up with your organization of your plants. If you have tons and tons of space, you're going to be putting up rows and rows, just write it on the end of your post. I know Shane at Kinfolk Farms does that, and that seems to work really, really well. Either get you, some spray paint and kind of a stencil and do that, or just write it out. That's probably going to be your best option. As we've talked about in other videos, you want to make sure that your soil height is appropriate for where your plant was before. This isn't quite as important with muscadines in regards to the trunk and any kind of grafting, etc., because you don't graft muscadines. Although there's potential for that, that's a whole nother story we won't get into today. But you do want to make sure that you keep your roots somewhat shallow. Muscadines have a very shallow root system, and that's one reason that you never want to mulch your muscadine vines. You'll hear a lot of people recommending that. The reason that is that in time, those roots can potentially grow up into the mulch, especially if you have a thick mulch layer. And when those roots grow up into the mulch, because they keep a very, very shallow root system, if you have a really hard freeze, like we've had a couple times in the last 5 years, where you're getting down into single digits, there's a good chance that you could kill off your whole vine, even if it's a well-established one, because your roots are right up near the surface. So just think about that. If you're way down in Florida, you probably won't have that problem, although this year they did, at least at the top of Florida. But just kind of think through that in regards to why you do not want to mulch. I will say I have mulched lightly in year one just to keep the weeds and grass at bay, but it's not necessarily a necessity. You do want to kind of think through with all of that when you're thinking about your watering, and just with these early vines, you want to make sure that you're keeping them moist a good bit of the time. You don't want them to dry out. This is even more important when you're talking about your bare root vines. These in pots aren't nearly as fragile. So let's get this Fry Seedless in the ground. You might have noticed that I planted this vine on a little bit on this side of the hole, and that's because when I looked at my row, I did not want to end up having one a little bit off. This one I dug the hole maybe about 3 or 4 inches over, a little bit more than I should have. So this will work out just perfect. Again, it's where this vine is coming up out of the ground. Next is Pam. You can see this one's definitely a little more vigorous. What I've learned is I like to plant these and then come back and prune them right when you're absolutely sure that there's no chance of frost, as well as it's supposed to rain here in the next couple hours. So that's you don't want to prune right before rain. You're just asking for potential diseases, those kinds of things. Muscadines are very resilient, but you don't want to risk anything. So if you've got time later on, just come back and do it later. Wow, definitely got some roots on this one. Disturb those just a little bit. There's no need to encourage more circling in the hole. So as you saw there, it's okay to prune the roots a little bit. My plan is to use one of these, so just trying to think through. This is a little crooked at the bottom. Again, it's not that big a deal, but just how I want to prune it and trying to have it come up as straight as possible. Because once you tie it up and it starts coming up to your trellis, you won't have any problems after that. As always, you want to make sure and water these in really well. All right guys, here goes Sweetmix. Woo, look at those roots. All right, that's our last one for this row. Oftentimes you have folks asking about how long before you should expect any kind of production. For muscadines, you might get some production in year 2, but in all honesty, you should really thin that down a lot so that you only have a couple of fruit. I know it's hard to not want to do that, but I would strongly encourage that just to help establish your plant. So on year 3, you should be able to have some fruit, and then year 4 and 5, it should really take off. Again, that's with optimal conditions and making sure that you have good growth. I have seen folks who had just loaded vines and under 2 years old in regards to in the ground is what I'm talking about. So just kind of think through your time frame, what you're looking at. Remember, this is a long-term marathon. This is not a sprint. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching today's video as we planted 3 new varieties of muscadine. Comment down below in regards to exactly how many you think we have now, and we will have to go count and see. Hopefully what we covered today was super beneficial for you, and as you look forward to putting some muscadine vines in your backyard or on your farm. Be sure and look at different varieties and what exactly you're looking for. If you're not sure, check out this video right here as we highlighted 30 to 40-ish different varieties when we visited the UGA Muscadine Test Vineyard down in Tifton, Georgia earlier in 2024. When you planted, you also wanted to make sure that you amended that soil some. We talked about the different types of soil a little bit in regards to clay as well as sandy loam, how those are different in regards to what you're going to amend the soil with, and also how you're going to do the spacing of those muscadine vines. Remember, you're looking at between about 16 and 20 feet. Depending on the variety and how vigorous they grow, could impact the distance that you put. But in all honesty, for I'd say probably 95% of us, it's just a matter of spacing and exactly what will work for you and the amount of space that you have up there, out there. So just consider that when you're thinking about that spacing, and if you can get an extra plant in, and or if you want to deal with the additional pruning if you plant them too close together. We've tried it all, and overall we tend to think that probably that 16-foot range is probably about right in all honesty. Also, you'll want to make sure and plan for your trellis. As we talked about earlier, we'll have upcoming videos in the near future highlighting what we're going to be doing on Trellis 3.0 as we've talked about. You'll also want to think forward in regards to not only that trellis, but also to your irrigation and your fertilization schedule. If you'll like, share, and subscribe to this video, then you certainly would be able to be notified in regards to when we talk about those specific items. So I'd encourage you to do that. When you do subscribe, don't forget you need to also ring that bell like. That's right, Mike Tyson did in the 1980s. Otherwise, YouTube won't necessarily notify you when we do post those videos with that content. The biggest issue today will be dealing with the wind, I do believe. Got a battery blinking at me and the wind is blowing like crazy, and I didn't stick another battery in my pocket. Gotta love it. So I think we're going to be fighting the wind all day today. I do apologize. I'll try my best to edit out as much of that as possible, but we've got to push on just for the sake of time. Wind, wind, go away. Come again another day. All right, guys, so we got all the holes planted. Holes planted. Wow, that's an outtake for sure. I'm thinking it's up to about 15 or 20 different varieties, but getting to be quite the list and something that we definitely enjoy. So looking forward to that. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching today's video. There'll be a video over here and a playlist over here highlighting a couple different things. This playlist over here is probably going to have a little bit of Muscadine content, and this over here is probably going to be one of our latest uploads. Thanks so much, guys. Hope you have a wonderful and blessed one. Look forward to seeing you next Sunday.